I'm reading from a book today written by an author named Bruce Marchiano. And the book I'm reading is called Jesus Wept. He's known for many other books, but Bruce Marchiano is also known for playing in the movie called The Book of Matthew. And it's a word for word scripture movie, and he's playing the role of Jesus in the movie. It's very good in my opinion, and it is on YouTube if you ever want to view that. Also, he's pretty famous for the two movies called The Encounter, and he also made, I think it's a series for the show The Encounter. Anyway, the book I'm reading today is called Jesus Wept, and I'm going to be reading from chapter 2. Chapter 2 is entitled, Before Abraham Was Born, I Am. I don't know about you, but it is far beyond me to even begin to picture a man who is God, who just happens to be a man, who is also God. But God is a man who is equally and simultaneously God. What does that look like? God with us, taken from the verse, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Can you imagine a man who walks through life with the same mind as any other man, but who thinks with the mind of God? A man who wakes every morning with the same heart and emotions as any other man, but whose heart also beats with the feelings and emotions of the Almighty. This man's heart explodes and leaps with the same hope that gave birth to everything that was created through his omnipotent hand. Everything from the stars in the midnight sky to the oceans that crash upon distant shores. From the splitting of the Red Sea to the splitting of his own flesh, Jesus. What does a man who is God act like? I mean, in a private moment when no one is watching. One of those moments that never got recorded in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. After all, John in chapter 21, verse 25 says, Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. Wow, is right. As silly as it may sound, what does that man eat for dinner? What does he think while he eats it? After all, his were the spirit hands that created it. He devised it and sculpted it. He knows every molecule, every neutron and electron. He scripted its every life function. He birthed it in his divine imagination. And thousands of years earlier, he foresaw the day he would be sitting there eating it. John 1:3 says, through him all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. Or does he just eat? Does he not think about those things? Only about the human hunger in his human belly. Like any other human, does he simply think about what would satisfy that hunger most and eat? What does he think is fun? What kind of jokes does he tell? How does he react when someone says something foul? What does he do to get away from it all? Or does he even have that desire to get away from it all? And when he cries, as he did before Lazarus's grave, surrounded by Lazarus's grieving family and friends, why does he cry harder than everyone? Why does he cry harder than everyone else put together? John 11:3 says, he groaned in the spirit. What does he know in the midst of those tears that is so far beyond what anyone else knows? What is it that causes him to groan deep within his spirit and weep? Jesus. Jesus was God, pure and simple. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. Taken from the book of Isaiah. The heart that shattered within him that day at his friend's grave, that Lazarus day, was not only the heart of a man weeping for the loss of someone close and dearly loved, as if that weren't painful enough, it was the heart of the living God. Who among us can possibly claim understanding of such a reality? Who among us can wrap comprehension around the vastness, the breadth, the dimension of what it means, the heart of God in the heart of a man? Who among us can begin to fathom even a corner of the compound layers and infinite depths of his divine perspective? And who among us could possibly bear the heartache that most surely flows from that perspective? It is heartache that you and I will never begin to know. And standing by that graveside, unbeknownst to anyone around him, Jesus was swallowed up in that heartache like you and I don't ever want to know. The wages of sin is death. Romans 6:23. We tend to accept death as, well, as a part of life. We're ripped apart when it imposes its inescapable reality upon the circle of those we know and love. But what can we do? We've got to move on. These things happen. That's life. But death is not life, nor even a part of life. Death is the exact opposite of life. It is the absence of life, the lack of life, the removal of what was created to live and enjoy life. It is the fallout, the price, the wages that you and I and all of creation have paid and continue to pay for doing things our own way and turning our backs on his way. And here's the huge truth that cries out to be understood, to be contemplated, to be dwelled upon, and grieved over, just as Jesus grieved over it on that long ago Lazarus day. Just as he grieves over it this day and every day. Death was never something God intended for any of us to taste or endure. There he is, the Son of the living God, standing before the grave of Lazarus, cloaked in the indignity of human flesh, and having been from before the beginning. He alone understands. He alone knows the fullness of the tragedy and the horror of the horror. None of it ever had to be. His human eyes stare at the stone that hides his human friend's remains, but his divine eyes see far beyond that stone into the horror hole of what that stone represents. The horror hole of everything his Father never wanted to happen. The horror hole of sin's abominable decree. In the wide range, in the wide angle scope of his divinity, he sees it all. the crushing of life, the tearing of spirit from flesh, the wretched finality of corruption and decay. He sees it all, and he alone understands. None of it ever had to be. Oh, the wound that it tears in his holy heart. He stands weeping, his human feet soiled with the dirt of a human burial ground, his human heart crushed by the death of a man he dearly loves. He stands weeping, his divine feet fixed across the expanse of divine understanding, his divine heart crushed by centuries upon centuries of death upon death of, oh, so many men, women, and children he dearly loves, Jesus. Surrounded by Lazarus's family and friends, his human ears are swallowed in the agony of human mourning. Their weeping and wailing swirls around him from every side. Their voluminous cry is an unholy, deep closing its mouth over the respiration of his holy soul. Oh, how it all caves in on his heart, how it beats and batters and rips at his being. He's the Son of the living God, and in solitary awareness, everything inside of him revolts and repulses, cries and collapses. No, no, none of this was ever meant to be. Yes, the wages of sin is death, Romans 6:23. The literal enormity of that truth is a cold, merciless spearhead thrust through his divine flank, as it would be so literally thrust on Calvary in weeks to come. It jabs and jabs at his heart, carrying every drop of blood ever spilled, every disease and calamity, every death, rattle, and final breath, and every tear that you and I ever shed or ever will shed in the wake of these horrors. Jesus. As his heart claws for air through the tidal wave of all that pain and understanding, again, having been there from the beginning, his divine memory is freshly awakened. His mind courses back to that day. The first day, that very first day. It was centuries of earth years earlier, but to Jesus, it's as if it were yesterday. It's a day that haunts him, the day that caused him to rise from his throne and plunge himself into humanity. It's the day that drives this Lazarus day, that drives his every day, and deep within, he remembers it all. A man and a woman stand beneath a tree. It's a fruit tree, an extraordinary fruit tree. It's a tree their father has placed in the middle of their garden and given a name, the knowledge of good and evil. It's the one tree that the man and the woman have been told to stay away from. You must not touch it. Its fruit is the only fruit they have been cautioned not to eat. If they do, if they touch it, if they eat it, they will surely die. Genesis 3:3. But isn't it just the hallmark of human nature? It is the one tree the man and woman can't seem to stay away from. Its fruit is the only fruit that makes them wonder, what would it taste like? And so a choice is made. Innocence is sold. Immorality and perfection and goodness are tossed away for the baubles of appetite and curiosity. Genesis 3:6. She took some and ate it. Oh, heartbreak of heartbreaks. It is tragedy eternal. If only they'd trusted him. If only they'd obeyed. But they did not. And now they stand, the man and the woman, naked and silent. For the first time, suddenly, a strange new reality is upon them. She is not smiling, and neither is he. Genesis 3:7. Then the eyes of both of them were opened. The man looks away from the woman, though he doesn't know why. The woman slides behind the tree, though she doesn't understand it. And as the fruit stains their lips, so also it stains creation. And its juice drips from their as its juice drips from their fingertips, so also it seeps into the tapestry weave of eternity itself. The supple breeze that allows that always was suddenly the supple breeze that always was suddenly cuts like a cold wind. The clouds that used to skate gaily across the sky's expanse suddenly gather, thick gray overtaking blue. And the birds, where are the birds? The garden always danced to a symphony of birds, but suddenly there is silence. As far as the ear can hear, only silence. Cursed is the ground. Genesis 3:17. And right on cue, extending an upturned claw through the center of creation's rent, sin greedily demands its initial due. An animal is slaughtered for its skin. That which was intended to warm a beast now hides the man, now masks the woman. First, blood is spilled. Death has begun. The wheel, cogs of human suffering, creak into motion and commence their unforgiving grind. Yes, standing by his friend's grave that need never have been, Jesus remembers that ancient day all too well. He remembers the tears he shed and the tears his father shed. He remembers even more the tears the man and the woman shed. He remembers their shame, their hiding. Oh, how it broke his heart to see them hiding. He only loved them. Why would they hide? He remembers their fear and confusion, their doubt and difficulty, their toil and strain. In the days that followed, he remembers their hunger, their arguments, all the times they got hurt and fell sick. Struggles would become their daily lot because of their choice that day. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." Genesis 4:8. He remembers when their elder son, Cain, drew a club against their younger Abel. He remembers the ebb of the boy's blood as his frame folded and dropped in an open field. The innocent in the boy's eyes as they looked up and silently pleaded, "Why?" The whisper of the boy's last breath, the silencing of the boy's last hope. He remembers the primal wail that rose from the lungs of the man not an hour later. The agonized shriek that exploded from the woman, the way she ran and threw herself on her son, the way the man cradled his limp body in his arms. He remembers the tears they cried that night, inconsolable tears, night after night. Yes, he's the Son of the living God, and he remembers it all. Now dressed in the costume of physical reality, staring into the black gluttony of his friend's grave. The memory lashes his heart as it has for centuries. A razor-edged refrain slicing afresh the timeless and ancient wound. The wages of sin is death. None of this was ever meant to be. And so his holy heart breaks. Oh, how his heart breaks under a crush unimaginable. The human anguish descends on him from one side, while the divine anguish buries him from the other into a million pieces, in a million places, in a divine depth that you and I will never begin to know. His heart breaks. It breaks and it breaks and it breaks. Jesus. We struggle to imagine it. A perfect heart within a perfect God, within a perfect man, is breaking in any circumstance. We mistakenly interpret that word perfect to mean invulnerable. We think of a heart that's so together it's beyond being bruised. But isn't it really quite the opposite? A heart never moved is called hard and dysfunctional. A man who can't cry is to be pitied above all. But a soft, sensitive, supple heart, one that is open and feels deeply, that's a good heart, a perfect heart. It's a heart that loves in all of love's fullness and in spite of love's costs. In a matter of weeks, Jesus, who now stands before his friend's grave, will willingly pay those costs. He will restrain all the power of the kingdom of heaven and allow foreign brutes to drive nails through his hands and feet. He'll hang from a piece of wood. His blood will drip into the soil. He'll cry, "It is finished," and then give up his spirit. How much softer can a heart possibly get? How much more broken over love that's been lost? How much more desperate for love to be gained? John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life. Greater love, greater heart. How much breathtakingly greater can they possibly be? Jesus. That's chapter 2. And if you would like to read this book, again, it's called Jesus Wept by Bruce Marchiano. See you on the next video.